The Holocaust is one of the most studied and often misinterpreted periods in world history. Many names stand out as being the perpetrators of these horrific crimes. One of these was Dr. Josef Mengele. The evolutionary progression of the Holocaust saw the level of killing and methods escalate and evolve over time. Mass killings in the East throughout Poland and the Soviet Union in open fields and forests with deep pits excavated for the dead were eventually replaced by the establishment of the concentration and extermination camps. But there was another area of consideration that was exploited, something that would horrify the world, and that was medical experimentation on living human beings. And after the war, Mengele became one of the most wanted human beings in history. Many people know his name as it is associated with Auschwitz, but very few know of his combat experience before he was assigned to the concentration camp and his life on the run after the war. We will briefly examine his life, citing some of the men who knew him. Who was Josef Mengele? What was his role in the German military? How did he become known as the Angel of Death? What was his fate after the war? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Josef Rudolf Mengele was born on March 16, 1911 in Günzburg in the Swabian region of Bavaria. He was the eldest of three sons. His younger brothers were Karl Thaddeus and Alois, and their parents were Karl and Walburga. Karl founded the Karl Mengele & Sons Company, later renamed as Mengele Agrartechnik, building, producing, and distributing farm machinery such as tractors. Mengele was a student of music, art, and competitive skiing and finished high school in April 1930 and studied philosophy and anthropology, earning his PhD at the University of Munich in 1935, later receiving a medical degree from the University of Bonn in 1937. He joined Der Stahlhelm, or Steel Helmet, in 1931, which became part of the Sturmabteilung, or the SA, in 1934 under Ernst Röhm. In January 1937, he joined the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene in Frankfurt, working for the German geneticist Ottmar Freiherr von Verschuer, who specialized in the study of twins. Mengele joined the team as a researcher, focusing upon genetic disorders. He joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and the Allgemeine SS in 1938. Given his skiing abilities, he was sent for and received basic training with the Gebirgsjäger, or mountain troops, in 1938. On July 28, 1939, Mengele married Irina Schönbein while working as a medical resident in Leipzig. They only had one child, a son named Rolf, born in 1944. When the war began in 1939, Mengele was assigned as a battalion medical officer for the invasion of Poland. During the invasion of Western Europe in June 1940, Mengele volunteered for medical service in the Waffen-SS as a SS Untersturmführer, or second lieutenant, in a medical reserve battalion until November 1940. He was next assigned to the SS Rasse and Siedlungshauptamt, or SS Race and Settlement Main Office in Poznan, where he evaluated people to determine if they qualified as Aryan. According to SS Obergruppenführer Karl Wolff, Mengele was already known to Reinhard Heydrich, as well as Heinrich Himmler, due to his close associations with many prominent medical officers. Following Operation Barbarossa on June 22, 1941, Mengele was then assigned to the Ukraine in command of a field hospital treating wounded soldiers. During one battle, where he was with a medical team, a Panzerkampfwagen 4 was hit by a Soviet anti-tank round and caught fire. Mengele rushed to the tank that was still taking small arms fire and pulled 2 surviving men from the burning tank, which later exploded. He received the Iron Cross Second Class for bravery. In January 1942, Mengele was assigned to the 5th SS Panzer Division Viking under Felix Steiner as a battalion medical officer. He was again in the fight saving German soldiers. Once again, on April 22, 1942, moving forward with the assault near Rostov-on-Don, Mengele treated the wounded division commander, Steiner, and then returned to the field the same day to gather more wounded when he again rescued soldiers from a burning tank destroyer on April 22, 1942, but he was badly wounded in doing so. An eyewitness to Mengele's bravery was Johannes Rudolf Mühlenkamp. See our video on Irina Sindler and the Warsaw Ghetto where he is concerned. According to Mühlenkamp, Dr. Mengele was on the battlefield. He was all over the place performing immediate first aid and organizing evacuation of the badly wounded. This was when I met him. I was in my command Tiger when one of our tanks blew up and started burning. Mengele ran onto the tank and began pulling men out, and we were still taking fire from the Russians. It was quite remarkable. He later returned to the tank even after being wounded. Mengele was decorated with the Iron Cross First Class, the Wound Badge in black, personally by Felix Steiner, and promoted to SS Obersturmführer, or First Lieutenant, and also awarded the Medal for the Care of the German People later by Himmler, but due to his wounds, he spent several months in recovery and was declared medically unfit for further active service in mid-1942. Following his recovery, he was transferred to the headquarters of the SS Race and Settlement Office in Berlin, again working with von Verschoor, who was the director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute of Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics. Mengele was promoted to Hauptsturmführer, SS Captain, in April 1943 and posted to Auschwitz personally by Himmler, where he was welcomed by Commandant Rudolf Höss. He was then appointed by the Chief Medical Officer at Auschwitz, SS Standortarzt Edvard Wirtz, to the position of Chief Physician of the Ziegener Familienlager, the Romani family camp at Birkenau, where he worked with doctors Horst Schumann and Karl Klauberg. The SS doctors did not treat inmates, but rather supervised inmate doctors, such as Hungarian prisoner Dr. Miklos Niesli, who were forced to work in the camp hospitals. Mengele made weekly visits to the hospital and sent any prisoners who had not recovered after 2 weeks to the gas chambers. Mengele also supervised the use of Zyklon B, used for the mass killings in the Birkenau gas chambers, located in crematoria 4 and 5. When a pneuma infection, also known as gangrenous stomatitis or cancrum oris, which is a gangrenous bacterial disease of the mouth and face, erupted in the Romani camp in 1943, Mengele studied the cause of the disease and wanted to develop a treatment. Mengele's son Rolf was born on March 16, 1944, and Josef was only able to see his son for a brief time in April. He would not see him again for 12 years. His responsibilities kept him chained to his laboratory and his victims. Along with Dr. Bertolt Epstein, a Jewish pediatrician and professor at Prague University, they isolated the infected in separate barracks, and several children were killed so that their heads and organs could be sent to the SS Medical Academy in Graz and other places for a detailed study. This continued until the rest of the Romani were killed in 1944. Other experiments included injecting chemicals into the eyes to change their color, removing the eyes, pinning them on walls like butterflies, removing the teeth and blood of dwarfs and those with deformities, and forced unnecessary drug and X-ray treatments. The skeletons of dwarves were sent to Berlin for further analysis. Mengele removed the organs of victims without anesthesia, and according to Dr. Niesli, forced one inmate who survived the removal of a kidney to work without painkillers afterwards. Mengele continued his research into using inmates for medical experimentation, which showed no consideration for the health, safety, or their suffering. But his passions were identical twins, people with eyes of 2 different colors, dwarves, and people with physical deformities. As Dr. Miklos Niesli and others reported, the twin studies may have also been motivated by an intention to uncover strategies for racially desirable Germans to reproduce more twins. The Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, German Research Foundation, provided Mengele a grant at the request of von Verschuer, who received regular reports and shipments of specimens from Mengele. A pathology laboratory was built at Crematorium II at Auschwitz II-Birkenau. Niesli prepared the specimens and performed autopsies. These patients were better fed and well treated for a while, instead of going to the gas chambers, and they had their own barracks, and the children had their own, and they were treated quite well, and Mengele would offer the children candy, and he was called Uncle Mengele. The twins had weekly physical examinations, and he would perform several procedures such as amputating healthy limbs, deliberately infecting one of the twins with diseases such as typhus, and transfusing the blood of one twin into another, and many died. Few twins survived, but Miriam and Ava Moses did, and they were liberated in January 1945. Ava Moses Cord died in 2019, but years ago she explained what she and her sister went through during her interview, and it was too horrific to put into this video. Those who survived were usually killed and autopsied for comparative post-mortem reports. Dr. Niesli recalled one occasion where Mengele killed 14 twins at the same time by injecting their hearts with chloroform. Some twins were still alive and sewn back to back in an attempt to create conjoined twins. During the typhus and scarlet fever outbreaks that hit the Jewish women's camp, Mengele sent 600 to be killed in the gas chambers during each event. The buildings were all cleaned and disinfected, and the new occupants were bathed, deloused, and given new clothing before being relocated. For these actions, Mengele was awarded the War Merit Cross Second Class with Swords and promoted to First Physician of the Birkenau subcamp in 1944. On January 17, 1945, 10 days before the arrival of Soviet forces at Auschwitz, Mengele was transferred 170 miles away to the Gross-Rosen concentration camp. What is often overlooked is that much of Mengele's research fell into Allied hands. It was, in many ways, groundbreaking, and Mengele's work set the stage for many future breakthroughs, especially in DNA and genome research. Mengele had been able to determine someone's perceived racial background from blood and tissue samples. He and Klauberg also developed various tests and treatments for certain cancers, especially in women. Mengele fled west as the war ended and managed to blend in with the millions of German soldiers in the various POW camps. Because he never received the SS blood group tattoo and wore an army uniform, he was not detected, although he was hunted. He escaped and lived in secret and obscurity, working as a farm stableman in Bavaria until he could escape Europe. With the assistance of the Rat Line, with a contact through Otto Skorzeny in the Vatican, Mengele fled to Italy in 1949, where he was arrested in Genoa due to a case of mistaken identity. The Italian police thought he was someone else, and they released him with an apology, not knowing who he actually was. He arrived in Argentina in July 1949 and initially lived in Buenos Aires, but he was smart. He did not gather with other former German veterans working for Juan Perón, as many of them were under surveillance. Mengele relocated a few times and eluded capture in spite of extradition requests by the West German government sent to Argentina. Mengele had lived there until 1959, but was alerted to an Interpol warrant, so he then fled to Paraguay. But following the capture of Adolf Eichmann in 1960 in Buenos Aires, he then fled to Brazil. He was apparently informed of these arrest warrants issued through Interpol, giving him the ability to flee each time, the last time to Brazil, where he met up with another former Nazi party member named Wolfgang Gerhard. After Eichmann, Mengele was one of the most wanted Nazi fugitives by West Germany, Israel, and Nazi hunters such as Simon Wiesenthal, who wanted to bring him to trial. I, your humble narrator, spoke with Wiesenthal about this case, and he said, "We had good, reliable information on Mengele, just like Eichmann. The problem was that after we got Eichmann, all of the Nazis in hiding began taking extra precautions. Mengele was always a few steps ahead of us." But Mengele traveled on fake documents, and even met his son Rolf during a ski holiday in Switzerland in 1956 when Rolf was 12 years old. Rolf only knew him at that time as an uncle. The Mengele family always knew where he was, and they sent money occasionally due to the success of the farm machinery business after the war. Josef Mengele's son Rolf finally managed to locate him through unnamed sources and letters that were written over the years, and he actually flew to Brazil and finally met the father he never knew in 1977.
It was a strange feeling. I saw him there standing in the door. It was the evening. I was surprised. "This is your father?" He looked to me old, small, somehow a little bit broken. And it was a very difficult situation because I knew that for him it was one of the most important events in his older days. And I was a visitor and I was his son, and I really had to push me somehow to give a certain cordiality or certain expression of sentiments, and he was very, very touched by the situation. His eyes were wet and nearly to tears.
Wolfram and Lieselot Bossert, an Austrian couple, had sheltered Mengele before his death in 1979 in Brazil, and their home was the meeting place. I, your humble correspondent, knew Rolf Mengele, who was practicing law in Freiburg, where I stayed several times to use the research archive there, and I asked him about that, and he was very candid and was well informed long before he met his father. And he said, "I did meet my father, and I asked him about the things people said about him. He said, 'You cannot believe all the things people say. I was just a doctor, a soldier, and they just wanted all of us to be punished. You cannot believe all the things you hear.' I knew he was not truthful. I think he justified his actions to himself."
Would not have had the power to come to him, and so he treated me somehow like a brave soldier which came through the enemy's lines. Then later on I came to this. Here he, as I told you, he exploded hearing this as a question from their son to him. In the sense, how can you imagine that this is possible for me to do these things? Don't you see at the first line this is a lie or propaganda or I don't know why. When I then stepped backwards and said, okay, selection, I think this was a fact and was admitted by him very clearly.
Rolf left Brazil, but his father stood firm by his National Socialist beliefs with not a word of regret.
Rolf Mengele would never divulge his father's exact location to investigators while knowing that his father was deemed responsible for the deaths of 400,000 people during his tenure at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Josef Mengele drowned in 1979 after suffering either a stroke or a heart attack while swimming off the coast of Pretoria, and was buried under the false name of Wolfgang Gerhardt, whose identity he assumed after Gerhardt's death. He even had a passport in that name. In 1985, a multinational team of forensic experts traveled to Brazil in search of Mengele. They determined that a man named Gerhard had died of a stroke while swimming in 1979. But following a thorough forensic examination, the dental records later revealed that it was Mengele, and he had at some point assumed Gerhard's identity and was indeed the man in the grave. Josef Mengele managed to escape justice, living a life of obscurity and poverty and staying off the radar.
I could never understand human being can act like this, and it would not change in any position if this is my father or not. It is really for me against all ethic and moral and human understanding and nature.
Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.